news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, June 23rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 13 degrees. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. A couple of big files up for debate today at Ottawa City Council. One dealing with the future of transit. The other deals with the future of a city councillor accused of being a little too cozy with a developer. Here's City News reporter Jason White.
Today, councillors will decide whether they think Barrhaven councillor Jan Harder deserves the punishment recommended by the Integrity Commissioner. He began investigating a citizen's complaint that Harder was too cozy with local development planning consultant Jack Sterling. Friends for years, Harder recruited Sterling's daughter to be her assistant, then hired Sterling's company to advise on planning issues. Meanwhile, Sterling's company was involved in two files that came before the planning committee Harder chairs. The Integrity Commissioner recommends kicking Harder off the planning committee and docking her 15 days' pay. Also today, Council decides whether to approve a multi-year $986 million plan to replace all OC Transpo diesel buses with electric ones. It includes a $400 million loan from the feds. Ottawa City Council begins just after 10 this morning. Jason White, City News.
City News time, 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
After a chilly start to our day, it's back to near seasonal highs today. We'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud through the area. The high near 23 degrees. Tonight, mainly clear down to 11, and tomorrow, increasing humidity, sun and cloud up to 28. For today, the high, 23.
And right now in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, 13 degrees. Vaccination rates are climbing and demand is up. The province is already ahead of the game when it comes to reopening benchmarks that it set. But the provincial government has not said if we will move into the next step a little bit early. Here's Kevin Meisner.
The Premier has previously hinted he would like to move to Step 2 of Ontario's reopening plan a little sooner than originally scheduled. Even Chief Medical Officer of Health Dr. David Williams has said the indicators are good right now, and that might make it possible to do that a little bit earlier than the current July 2nd target date. However, Solicitor General Sylvia Jones remains cautious, preferring not to rush things, especially with the risk of the Delta variant in Ontario.
I couldn't be happier if we could open sooner, but I also want to do it safely.
Now, Ontario is still in step 1 of reopening, even though 76% of the province has received its first vaccination. That matches the 70 to 80% vaccination rate set out for step 3 of reopening. Step 2 would allow for hair salons and other personal care services to reopen finally again, but it would also allow retailers to open at 50% capacity. It would allow for larger outdoor gatherings and small indoor gatherings, all over what would be an extended Canada Day long weekend for a lot of people. So that could be a worry for many health experts who say, generally, we do see a spike in cases after a holiday weekend. I'm Kevin Meisner.
City News time, 9:03. The Liberals have been scrambling to get 4 priority bills through Parliament before the summer break starts later today. Budget bill will be put to a final vote this afternoon, but it and 3 others could die if the Senate does not extend its session beyond today. And a Russian warship fired warning shots at a British destroyer after it ignored a notice against making an intrusion into Russian waters near Crimea in the Black Sea. Russia's defense ministry says a warplane also dropped live bombs. It's the first time since the Cold War Moscow has used live ammunition as a deterrent. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
it's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
I had to turn the heater on in the car this morning on the 23rd of June. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. It's going to be another fast-moving day in the news business. Fast. There are lots of things in the mix that we are keeping an eye on. 2 big stories for us. First, the City Council meeting today starts in less than an hour's time. Our friends at Rogers Television will leave the Rob Snow Show and take you to City Hall and the council meeting in its entirety. And then It's the last day of Parliament. That's all she wrote. The summer recess for MPs soon upon us. Next up could be a federal election. Next up, likely a federal election. We're going to talk a bit about that today. New Nanos poll. Oh boy, shows the Conservative Party of Canada 25% in the polls. 25%! Oh my goodness, could be a tear-jerker of an election night if you cheer for the team in blue. But more on that later. Those are not the only stories that we plan to cover this morning. There's the reopening in Ontario, as you just heard in our newscast. You know, and this is a good question for you, good listeners, during our talkback hour. Given this province's vaccination effort so far, should we just be moving along? Pick up the pace. Forget about this staged reopening business. Let's get on with things. This is what I am hearing more and more of now. That there is no reason to even bother with step 2 of the reopening. We should go to step 3, and we should be doing that ASAP. According to the latest vaccination data, 76% of Ontarians have had at least one dose of vaccine. 76%. And almost 26% of Ontarians, it's 25.9, let's call it 26. 26% of Ontarians have had 2 doses of vaccine and are now fully vaccinated. Both numbers greatly improved from months ago. And the vaccination program in Ontario is closely tied to the reopening plan in Ontario. And you could make the case, I think you can make a very compelling case. We should be really moving on to step 3. We haven't even entered step 2 yet. We're still on step 1, the first step. Under the Ford government's own plan, the province is supposed to move to step 3. That's what they call step 3, phase 3. When vaccination rates are between 70 and 80%, they are. And when at least 25% of the population is fully vaccinated, it is. And under the rules of that step 3, I mean, we're not quite back to normal, but we're closer to normal. You're allowed to eat a meal inside a restaurant, and a whole bunch of other restrictions are loosened or fall by the wayside entirely. And as for the local situation, there are 10 people in the hospital, in local hospitals with COVID-19. 10, and there are 5 patients in ICU. Okay. The Ford government said to us 70 to 80%, 1 shot, 25%, 2 shots, you get to pass go from step 2 to step 3. Here, it's all we can do to get out of step 1. And what are we hearing now? Despite our enthusiasm for vaccinations, the Ford government keeps telling us, not so fast, Delta variant, okay? I would really like to run this by you during our talkback hour, okay? It's summertime. Summer 2021. We're doing 200,000 vaccinations in Ontario every day. And we have met what the government said would be the criteria for the final phase of its latest version of a reopening plan. And yet we're not even moving to the final step. We're not even moving to the middle step yet. Look, the situation is greatly improved, and I am so happy for that. On the 15th of April, there were almost 5,000 cases reported that day, the 15th day of April in Ontario, okay? 4,800 cases. That number has now dipped to below 300 a day. We haven't been at below 300 a day since September of last year, when not a single person in Ontario had even a single dose of vaccine. So should we just go on to step 3 soon, ASAP, today, this weekend? What do you think? Let's debate. Let's discuss that during the Talkback Hour. We do it every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. 750-1310 is our call-in line. I encourage you to call in today. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. I keep seeing that finish line. But it's like somebody's got a hold of my legs. The call is from organizations, for example, like Dan Kelly's Canadian Federation of Independent Business. The call is don't even bother with step 2. Let's just go to step 3 and let's do it now. I'd love your thought. And just as an aside, this was more to just satisfy my curiosity after watching the hockey game last night. Habs, who knew, right? The Habs just keep going. I was looking at the statistics for COVID-19 numbers and the vaccination numbers for Las Vegas. Because of the hockey game last night, Habs win, and the arena is packed. The Las Vegas hockey arena is called the T-Mobile Arena. Attendance at the game last night, the announced attendance, 17,969. Now at Canadian Tire Center, that would be a sellout. Pretty close to a sellout. I think, what's the capacity at Canadian Tires? It might be 18.5, around there. But last night at the Las Vegas hockey game, 17,969 screaming fans. Don't they look like they're having a great time? Now, in Las Vegas, 48% of the population there has had one dose of vaccine, and 40% of the Las Vegas population is fully vaccinated. They had pretty much a sold-out hockey game. In Ontario, the numbers, 76% one dose, 25, 26% two doses. You can't even get a haircut. And the Toronto Blue Jays can't even play in Canada. So I'd love to get into that again today. Like I said, we'll be watching, listening, dropping into the city council meeting. Oh, it's going to be a heck of a city council meeting. $1 billion electric bus buy is up for a vote. It's a done deal, right? We all know it's a done deal. The only question I have, I guess, at this point is, will it be unanimous? Will every single councillor vote for this $1 billion bus buy? Will there even be a single nay? I doubt it. It seems everyone is on board the $1 billion electric bus ride, despite this 2-week rush job. The many unknowns, I still doubt anyone's going to vote against it. You just can't vote against it. It'd be politically damaging. You would be demonized. Knuckle-dragging Neanderthal. And then there is the future of Councillor Jan Harder as the chair of the city's planning committee, which has really seized the attention and the agenda of this council meeting. Is her time in that role, chair of planning, coming to an end? Maybe it's measured in just a matter of hours. Or, and I would not count this out, ladies and gentlemen, is based on my experience of watching how the mayor operates. Does the mayor have something up his sleeve? You just never know when it comes to city politics. I have learned never to underestimate Mayor Jim Watson's ability to maneuver his way out of a jam. And Jan has been loyal to the mayor, and Jan is in a jam. There's a legal opinion landed in my inbox this morning. It is making the rounds of the local news media. 15-page opinion from a lawyer by the name of John Mascarin, his partner with a firm called Aird Burles. And in that letter, he says the firm was asked to provide an opinion on the findings of the Integrity Commissioner. And remember, the Integrity Commissioner, City of Ottawa, has said Jan Harder should be removed as chair of the planning committee. Conflict of interest tainted the planning process, should be docked 15 days' pay, and should reimburse the legal fees of the investigation from our office budget. The legal opinion from this particular law firm says, no, should not happen. quote, it is not a defensible remedial measure. There is no nexus. We requested an interview with this lawyer just because it's very much the counter opinion. We got a hard and fast no. No, thank you. I will not be doing an interview on the Rob Snow Show. Fine. We'll see if this will sway the opinion and the votes of any of the councillors. 10 o'clock start time for the city council meeting. Rogers Television with the play-by-play. The military ombudsman is coming up in just a few minutes from now on sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces, the scandal, the crisis that has consumed the Canadian military, and interference in investigations, and the ombudsman's role by the Minister of National Defense. That was a damning allegation yesterday. So that's coming right up. The last day of Parliament. You'll score your political fix right after the 9:30 news. We'll talk about this new Nanos poll, 25% support. Goodness gracious, for the Conservative Party of Canada. To end the parliamentary session, John Ivison had a column highlighting those poll results this week, writing for the National Post. Nationally, Conservatives end the parliamentary session, enter a potential election campaign 13 points behind the Trudeau Liberals. 13 points behind. And in Ontario, vote-rich Ontario, battleground Ontario, the Trudeau Liberals up on the O'Toole Conservatives by 20 points. I thought Aaron O'Toole said he was the leader who would deliver Ontario for the Conservative Party. Southern, suburban Ontario. Will he even win his own seat? Why are the Conservatives so unpopular? What can they do to turn things around? Can anything stop Trudeau from winning a majority? Here until noon, Rob Snow Show on City News.
An old-fashioned traditional grocery store. You're going to find a butcher, okay? You want a steak cut a certain way, you're going to get it. You know, there's flour piled in the warehouse. There's mixers on the floor. There's flour on the floor. The bakery's rented out to Frank Nicolo. It's him and his son come in at night. They mix the dough, they roll the dough, and they bake the dough. It's not the traditional frozen and thaw and put it in the bin, okay? It's made from scratch 7 days a week. It's probably the only bakery left in Ottawa that does that. You know, then customer service. You know, we're big on that. The cashiers, the deli. You're not. If you ask for something, they're not going to point. It's an aisle number 7. They're going to bring you there. Okay. If you have too much groceries out, we'll take it out to your car. You know what I mean? There's nothing we don't do for our customers, and we evolved around our customers. They would come in and say, you know, can you try getting me this? You know, can you get me this? So that's how we built the lineup we have now. Okay, so we have a lot of unique items that someone that came over to, you know, live in Canada hasn't seen this particular product, but we sourced it and we have it for them that, you know, like something they used to have as a kid. We have a lot of those unique items, a lot, you know, from like all over the world. And we source it through, you know, distributors in Montreal and Toronto that bring in the product in bulk, and we piggyback off of them. Probably the largest European deli in Ottawa. We sell lots because people buy lots. It's nothing really complicated about that. You know, we turn over a lot of product. You know, we package it properly. We buy, and we're always consistent. You know, you're always going to find, you know, Cuddy turkey breast. You know, San Daniel mortadella. You're always going to get the same brands. We don't flip back and forth to save 20 cents. It's always the same brands the last 29 years. Best sandwiches in town. It's simple. It starts off with fresh bread every day baked in the store. Anything that's left over goes to breadcrumbs. So you're getting a fresh bun every day that was baked probably 4 hours before you get here, okay? Not only baked, made, like, you know, mix the flour, roll the dough, proof the bread, and bake the bread, okay? Then all the ingredients come right off the shelves. You know, your lettuce, your tomatoes, all your condiments. and they're cut up fresh in the deli, not like the big, corporate restaurant chains that your lettuce comes in shredded in a bag. You open it up and you throw it in the bin. Takes 2 or 3 days to get here from California. How long is it in the bag? The big difference is like making a sandwich at home, and you don't have to do the work. It's really what the trick is, and using the freshest ingredients possible.
Well, Icon
The Rob Snow Show returns.
on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
Canada's military ombudsman is accusing the Minister of Defence and the Department of National Defence of trying to exert control over investigations and also of ignoring recommendations for change. And this morning, Greg Lick joins us, National Defence and Canadian Armed Forces Ombudsman. Good morning.
Good morning, Ron.
Nice to hear from you. Thank you for taking the time. When you say exert control, what do you mean?
Well, certainly I've talked about it yesterday, the lack of action or inaction on recommendations we put forward. So I'm glad the minister stated in his statement yesterday that he received a report on recommendations we put forward in last November. We didn't even receive a response until earlier this June. 7 months we have to wait for even acknowledgement of our recommendations, and then no action plan associated with it that says we've accepted the recommendations and we're going to deal with it. But that's not good. It's not good for our constituents. It's not good for members of the military and their families who those recommendations touch. At the same time, when the minister has the right, appropriately, to ask me to look at a particular issue, he asked me to look at racism, and we provided advice on that. But at the same time, the minister and his staff tried to direct who we should hire to work on that particular project. We talked to that individual, but even he admitted he doesn't have any recent experience. To actually exert influence by saying who we should hire to work on a particular investigation, that's inappropriate.
And why is that inappropriate?
Well, certainly we are an independent organization. We are meant to provide objective advice, objective analysis, and recommendations. To say that we should hire someone who may or may not, but certainly would have a perceived bias to one way of thinking, that is not appropriate, and that is not what an ombudsman does.
But are you truly independent, I guess? That's the question. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Well, exactly. I mean, we try as much as possible to exert our independence every day. So even when the department tries to exert influence on us through sometimes just unintentionally even, and I talked about that yesterday in terms of how they said, well, we should have our investigation questions approved by the department. That is clearly inappropriate. We educated, the individuals, but I wrote to the deputy minister and the acting chief of defense staff to say that's not appropriate. We corrected it. We educated them, and we've asked the two individuals, we asked the deputy minister and the acting chief of defense staff to say something about it, to reiterate to people that this is within our authority to do this. That type of influence, even unintentionally, is still not appropriate and continues on a daily basis.
Who is your boss?
My boss, I report officially to the Minister of National Defense, but I don't work for him. We have an independent. That's why I have the authority, as I did yesterday, to go out independently and talk to Canadians, in this case through the media. I have that authority that's clear in the minister's directions, in the directives that outline our mandate. And so that is who I look at as my boss. I look at Canadians, and particularly our constituency. That's who I work for.
But you would be more independent if you answered to Parliament, you would agree, right? Instead of the minister.
Yes, and that's what I put forward in our position paper, and that's what every ombudsman since our creation in 1998 has put forward as well. But I think more importantly, the two things that I really asked for and said are must-haves in our position The idea of being able to escalate it beyond the department, even to the Prime Minister, to be able to deal with certain issues, but ultimately to Parliament, so that there is heat and light put on certain issues, and they can enforce action if necessary. That creates that ability to get action done, and that's what I'm talking about more than anything nowadays. There is so much inaction, so many review after review after review. That's not appropriate, and it's not serving our members well. The other part of it, though, is the ability to demand responses in a timely manner set by me, probably in negotiation with the department on a particular issue. That's fair. But ultimately, there has to be a timeline. Otherwise, I'm going to wait another 7 months for another response or even an acknowledgement of a report or recommendations that we put forward.
Quoting you, the inaction of senior political, military, and civilian leadership within the government have eroded trust within the defense community. What is an example of an erosion of trust?
Well, as I just said, Rob, I think the idea of doing a review upon a review upon a review, that's inaction. What we put forward is part of the solution, certainly not the whole solution, but part of the solution that is relatively easy to implement. Yes, legislation takes time, but relatively easy to implement, and it can support the initiatives that the department works on to change the culture. And that really what needs to change is the culture, so that victims are courageous and have the confidence to come forward, and leaders are courageous to be able to take action without reprisal as well.
Your predecessor, Mr. Walborn, spoke previously about a toxic environment, a toxic work environment. How would you describe the environment now? Has it improved, or is it still toxic?
Well, I think the issue that Mr. Walborn was talking about was the allegations that were laid against him and some of my staff. Those were very clearly inappropriate, no due process. The process that they were used to investigate was completely unfair, and the federal court said so. Justice Sin was very clear on that particular issue. That weighs upon people still to this day. There has been no correction, even after Justice Zinn actually said that it was unfair. We have not seen any correction, any even apology to those people. That's inappropriate, and that is still part of the toxic environment that we work within.
What is this doing to the... I'm wondering what you're hearing from people in the defense circles, what this is doing to the morale or even the preparedness of the Canadian Armed Forces. I mean, we have a story that is on our newswire today that a Russian warship fired warning shots at a British destroyer in the Black Sea near Crimea today. The world can be a dangerous place. What does this mean for the national defense of the country, sir?
Well, certainly we're hearing increased complaints on various issues coming forward. That's a good thing because it's getting out into the open. But as I said yesterday, I truly believe that not only are our allies watching, but better, or rather worse, our enemies are watching, and they're seeing the issues that are being brought forward. But more importantly, they can use that information against us. That is a national security issue. The allegations that are being brought forward, some more than 32 years old, that can have a security issue for people, and enemies will use that. That is a national security issue. This has to be fixed.
Thank you, sir, for your time this morning.
Thank you, Rob.
Yep.
My pleasure.
Greg Lick, National Defense, Canadian Armed Forces, Ombudsman. Your political fix. After the news on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, June 23rd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 15 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. City Council in Ottawa dealing with a couple of major issues starting in about a half an hour from now. Now, Rogers TV will break away from the Rob Snow Show at 10 o'clock, bringing you this and every City Council session. The idea to borrow a lot of cash to help equip the city with buses run on electricity rather than diesel is front and center, as is the Integrity Commissioner report recommending a loss of pay for Councillor Jan Harder for perceived conflict over her relationship with a planning consultant and his family. COVID vaccination rates are at a level in Ontario that the province hoped to reach in order to get to step 3 of reopening. Since we aren't even at step 2 yet, the province under some pressure to move up that date from July 2nd, next Friday, to earlier for things like haircuts. Trans-Canada Highway completely shut down in both directions at the New Brunswick border with Nova Scotia. Cars and trucks and transports backed up for several kilometers. The blockade went up to protest Nova Scotia's decision to impose modified rules for New Brunswick residents as it reopened this morning to travelers from the other Atlantic provinces. City News Time at 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's time to score your political fix. Susan Smith is back, Principal, Bluesky Strategy Group. Good morning, Sue.
Good morning,
Great
Rob.
to hear from you. I hope you're well.
Very well, thanks.
Happy summer. Happy summer to you. Okay. Happy last day of Parliament to you as well. And say
hello.
Margaritas. Say hello to Garry Keller, Vice
Morning,
President of Strategy Corp, and welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Garry, great to hear from you.
Great to be with you.
And again, happy summer, happy last day of Parliament.
Same to you.
So, Garry, we already know Sue was on a couple of weeks ago. I asked her the same question, so I'll ask you. When is the election?
That is the best official Ottawa parlor game that goes on in a minority government, and it's been going on since January of last year. Look, I think what I've always said is you can gauge when an election is coming when the government starts using language like Parliament isn't working, Parliament is unproductive, Parliament is toxic. And all throughout the January to June session, there were times when that flared up. And to me, that was a bit of a tell on behalf of the government. Minister Freeland had said it. Pablo Rodriguez, the government House leader, had said it on occasion. And then it went quiet, which to me meant like, no, we're not going to an election. But the last 2 weeks, Parliament isn't working has been the language from the government, and it's ramped up to 11. The Prime Minister in press conference yesterday used it. So I think we're going to hear that language throughout the summer. There's going to be a bit of a break because we've got to give Canadians some summertime. I think the Prime Minister is probably going to go on holiday around, early August, and he's going to come back and decide whether he goes in late August or early September without coming back to Parliament. So if I was a betting man and said when they're going to an election, I'd say election call around Labor Day for a late September, early October election.
Late September, early October election. Do you agree? What do you think of Gary's rationale there, Susan?
I actually agree with Garry on that. I probably revise where I was the last time we spoke, Rob. I thought the election might be a little bit later in October.
Okay.
I'm hearing other things that it might be a little bit sooner, like Gary's anticipating. To me, the real big factor is, how many 2 shots can we get into arms from a vaccine perspective, and are the kids back in school? I think those are huge. And the polling numbers, all parties will be watching the polling numbers, and the Liberals in particular will be looking at their numbers in the big areas.
They have to be happy with the polling numbers right now.
Ontario, Quebec, Atlantic Canada, they'll really be looking at those numbers to see if that can push them into a majority territory or a stronger minority territory, though they obviously hope for a majority. So I think I'd agree with Garry that I think they'll be Election fever is upon us, or coming soon, and we'll be in its full tilt by September.
Well, we certainly heard this yesterday, toxic, obstruction, holding up our legislation that would really help Canadians. So what do you think, Susan, about this narrative from Mr. Trudeau? I can't work with these people anymore.
Well,
that sets the stage for, I need a majority mandate so we can get the good work done for Canadians, the middle class, those working hard to join it, that kind of thing.
Well, thank you. You're doing a great job on that, Rob.
Yeah, well. Can I be the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity? I hear that comes with a driver.
Look, there are a lot of people who are part of the middle class, and there are a lot of people working hard to join it,
Yes,
Rob.
there are. Yeah.
But in terms of the toxicity of Parliament or Parliament not working, it is true, in fact, that there have been, the opposition has held things up, in particular the Conservative opposition. Finally, a bill passed yesterday, Bill C6, banning conversion therapy. And there were many, many Conservative MPs who were standing up and blocking that bill being passed through third reading and being able to go to the Senate. 62 Conservative MPs voted against it. Aaron O'Toole supported it, which, he deserves credit for. But it was some shenanigans on the part of some of his members that were causing that to happen. That's no good. The budget bill still isn't through. I think it will get through eventually because the Conservatives don't want to be responsible for the sunsetting of some of these COVID support programs without the alternatives or the economy being fully opened up. So that will happen, but that's taken a while too.
Well, I mean, we went 2 years without a budget. What's 3?
Well, the reason we went 2 years without a budget is because we were in a pandemic, Rob. You know that,
Yeah,
right?
we still are.
It shifted, it shifted constantly. But I think with the advent of vaccines, we're starting to finally see the end of it. I mean, this time last year, as I've said before on the air, we were still washing our cornflakes boxes. Now I have 2 shots. Gary, I don't know if you've had 2 or Rob, you've had 2, but you probably have your appointments to get your second.
Right.
So we're looking at a vastly different scenario.
Okay. But again, I think Susan's building on your narrative, Gary, that the place is dysfunctional and what we really need is stability and a vision for the future. And if you want that, vote Liberal and give us a majority, right?
Well, where you've heard that language before? You know who said that when calling an election in 2008? It was Stephen Harper. Stephen Harper in
stable
2008
majority government
said, Parliament isn't working. It's toxic. I can't work with the opposition. And I need an election. The funny thing is, Liberals always love to trash Stephen Harper, but, the more that Justin Trudeau's been in power, the more he looks like the Stephen Harper of 2008, 2011, and less the Justin Trudeau 2015.
That's fighting words, Gary.
Prorogation and shutting down Parliament and committees and all of these things. Look, the government, I was glad to see C6 pass. That's a great thing. Important to note, though, that this is one of the first bills that the government tabled back in September, October, when it came back from prorogation. And, it seemed to languish. The government didn't call it for debate. The government didn't seem to make it a priority. So, there can be blame on both sides for lacking an agenda going forward. So, it's going to be up to the opposition parties to make the case either why an election isn't needed, because I think in the NDP's case, they can actually say, look, we've actually tried to make Parliament work. We've supported the government on their budget legislation and on X, Y, and Z. That narrative is false. The Conservatives may want to say, you know what, Parliament isn't working. Here's a long list of issues where we feel our rights as parliamentarians and MPs have been, overridden by, a Liberal minority with the opposition, the left-wing opposition supporting them. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out and how that comes. But important to note, in 2008, the language that Stephen Harper used to call for an election that Parliament isn't working, he didn't get a majority government. He got an increased minority. He didn't get his majority government.
Okay. So let's work from the assumption that whether it's September or October, there's going to be an election. Let's just work from that assumption right now. What do you think the campaign would actually look like because of the pandemic, which we hope will be basically a mopping up exercise by that point? But for example, will there be door knocking? Will local candidates be out, walking up driveways, knocking on doors? Will the leaders be making stump speeches, or would you expect it to be more of a virtual campaign, Sue? What do you think?
That's me? I think that's a great question. I think that's a really good question, actually, and I think we're going to see a campaign like we've never seen before in Canada. Just like we had a hybrid parliament, I actually think we're going to have a hybrid campaign. I think it's going to be a combination of both. There will be door knocking and there will be stump speeches, but there'll be door knocking and then the candidates will stand on the driveway so that the people can stand in the front door and have a chat with them. I think there will be events and stump speeches. I think they may be smaller crowds, still more spaced out, but you will see that kind of thing because there's a tremendous amount of energy that's conveyed, and politicians like to be able to connect with the people directly, and I think people crave that kind of connection too. And don't forget that our vaccine rollout still continues, and that will all be the big, it's all predicated on that in terms of, and where the variants are and where COVID is, et cetera. But I do think you're going to see that. So I do see some crisscrossing of the country happening by the leaders. Yeah. I definitely see some campaign events taking place. Maybe they're more outside rallies versus inside rallies. All the campaigns will want that kind of footage for their social media campaigns, their commercials, all of those things. But I also think you'll see the hybrid. There will be some video town halls and other things where they can reach more people, and this will favor the Greens, and this will favor the NDP. It'll save the campaign's money. In the sense that people will be able to be in more places.
Yeah, I wonder if it levels the playing field. I wonder if it levels the playing field. I mean, in the last election, the New Democrats didn't even have a plane.
Yeah, I don't know
what kind of fair fight is that? There's Mr. Trudeau. He's flying around the country. He's got 2 airplanes, and the NDP doesn't have one. It screams inequality, I tell you. That's the wealth gap right there.
That's democracy.
But I think...
Go ahead, Gary. Go ahead.
I think, Rob, to your point, and I think Susan's right in a lot of this, is that we're going to be much more digital for a national campaign, I think. We do have a bit of a track record. We've had 4 provincial campaigns during COVID, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, British Columbia, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Those had a combination of some, heavy digital online presence coupled with some door knocking. But, talk about no media on a national campaign or no campaign plane. Campaigns have already been heading that way as people adapt to a more social online presence. In the provincial election in 2018 in Ontario, Doug Ford had no media on a campaign bus. Media had to show up at events on their own.
That's right.
And quite frankly, the media doesn't want to pay $10,000 a week sending a reporter on a national campaign. They are too looking to decrease costs. So, look, I think there's going to be a virtual campaign. I think locally, I think Susan's right. I think there will be some door knocking, depending on what local rules look like and depending on people's comfort level. I mean, do people really want politicians knocking on their doors with face-to-face contact? I think that's mixed. And I think there's still a lot to be determined. But I noticed in the United States presidential election, they kind of pioneered the use of sort of the drive-in rally, where you'd have a leader up on a stage and it's sort of a drive-in situation, and you might have 1,000 cars sitting there and people honking their horns, and that might be a factor. Of course, in Canada, weather is also a factor, and it's much easier to do an outdoor rally in September, October than November or December.
But I do wonder this lack of, I'm sorry, Sue, if I could just interrupt here, this lack of getting out and meeting people. I think about elections past. Mr. Trudeau in advance would normally do this cross-country thing, do a Q&A session in the round, so to speak. And Liberals have described this to me in the past as kind of his getting warmed up, and he felt that the ability to have the audience ask him questions helped him prepare for things like leaders' debates and whatnot. And they were always on television, of course, so some of them went better than others. But nevertheless, I wonder the ability not to do that right now, if that hurts Mr. Trudeau, for example.
Well, I think it'll still happen in its own way. I think, and that was what I was going to say, was that we'll definitely have the leaders' debates. They will be in person. They're not going to be virtual. You'll see all the leaders on the stage. duking it out. There'll maybe plexiglass between them, but they'll be there. I do think that there'll be some kind of town hall tour. Trudeau loves that. I mean, his staff, people have told me that he goes into those town halls and he looks around the room, and they've typically been packed. So I think there'll be less packed rooms because of social distancing. And so I'm sure the opposition will try to say nobody wants to show up for the Prime Minister, but it will be social distancing that will dictate the number of people in the room. But I'm told he looks for like the toughest question. And he loves that. It's the former school teacher and the guy, and the debater and the guy. He loves to have those kinds of discussions. So I think there'll be some form of that. It will not be in the scale that has been in the past, but it's a great way for the Prime Minister to connect with people.
You would think, Garry, naturally that if it's, say, a more virtual campaign, that maybe the Liberals would have the advantage. Is that true? Is that necessarily true? What do you think?
I think in a case like this, it doesn't matter really who is the incumbent. The advantage does go to the incumbent in this situation. You're better known. You have some experience at doing this. And that was certainly the case in each of the provincial elections that were had. And 3 of them went from minority governments to majority governments. Coupled with the fact that, Aaron O'Toole was elected as leader of the Conservative Party at the end of August last year, in the middle of the pandemic. Normally when a new leader is elected, they get out and see the country, do town hall meetings, do business roundtables, do a lot of campaigning. He's not been able to do that. No. And as a result, he still has a large unknown quotient about him when people are polled, and so that's been a disadvantage to him as leader. So I think you've got to estimate that the tie goes to the runner, the tie goes to the incumbents on this case in terms of the advantage. Okay. I'm told that both parties are planning on heavy advertising, the CPC and the NDP, and so I think we'll see a lot of TV advertising as well this time.
Well, we welcome their business. I want to pick up on Aaron O'Toole expectations for his first campaign as leader of a national party. When we come back, it's your political fix. Rob Snow Show on City News.
Papa Jack was started 14 years ago, really by accident more than anything. A friend of mine had bought a grocery store. A popcorn machine was in there. He didn't want it. I ended up by buying it. My family thought I was nuts. When I first said, come and pick up this popcorn machine, my son said, what the heck for? I won't use exact words. But anyway, we started, and it just kept on growing and growing. But at the time, I was the only one selling popcorn in Ottawa. But we persevered as a family, and here we are. So it's been very, very rewarding for my family and myself. And to see our brand name, Papa Jack, and Papa Jack came out of, I wanted something that was going to be very bilingual. So Papa, and then in Ontario, everybody called me Jack, even though my name is Jacques. In Quebec, it's fine, it's Jacques, but in Ontario, it was always Jack. So we married the two together, Papa, Jack. With the store that we have on Thurston Drive, it basically, the factory's in the back. If you come into the store, you can see how the popcorn is being made during the week. So it adds an extra layer of, you can see the sanitation, you can see how we do it. It's not like making popcorn. Most people thought when I started this, I was making popcorn in my garage or in my basement. No, never did. It was started in this building, in the back of the building, and then we kept growing and growing until what we have now. My daughter and my son came up with a brilliant idea to do a fundraiser online. So basically all people have to do is to register here, and we give them a special code number. And with that code number, they tell their friends or their neighbors, everybody, to buy online from us with that code number. And then at the end of each period, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, then we'll pay them a 20% of all the businesses that we got through that code number. One thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the Ottawa people who have supported us and support local businesses. It sometimes people, they talk about buying locally. Now it becomes that much more important to buy locally, to support your local businesses, because not too many of them are going to survive this. We're fortunate that we're so far so good.
Is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Your Political Fix, Part 2. With Susan Smith, Principal Bluesky, and Garry Keller from Strategy Course. So, Garry, it's going to be Aaron O'Toole's first campaign, leader of a national party. What are realistic expectations for the Conservative Party of Canada for this election?
Well, look, Conservatives are always wanting to win, to form government, and of course, that is Aaron O'Toole's goal here. The challenge for him right now, the way the polls stand, is that he's probably going to need a little help, especially in Ontario, to accomplish that. For the Conservatives, they need, in order to win, they need to do a few things. They need to hold what they have in terms of seats, and they need to gain in Ontario, specifically in the GTA.
Yeah.
And, I've seen two polls this week in Ontario when it comes to polling numbers. One had it a much closer race. I think it was 34-30-23. And then there was another poll that had a much wider gap. And so, Aaron O'Toole has said in his speech to the Conservative Convention that, we're going to win. If we're going to win, we're going to win it on our own. We're not going to depend on others. But in fact, in order to win some seats in the GTA, he's going to need a strong NDP showing. He's going to need Jagmeet Singh to eat into Justin Trudeau's numbers in Ontario. So, like I say, Conservatives always are aiming for the big prize. If you look back to the last election, I said if Andrew Scheer could hold Trudeau to a minority and increase his seats, he's probably safe. Well, Andrew Scheer won the popular vote.
He did that, and he wasn't
exactly
safe.
And won the popular vote and got knifed the day after. So, what do I know about politics?
I know. It's tough.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough campaign, and he's going to have to show, progress, and Conservatives want him to beat Trudeau, and that's not an easy task.
Okay. Susan, what do you think, Susan?
Yeah, well, it's not going to be an easy task for Aaron O'Toole on a whole bunch of levels. First of all, he's going to spend the first half of the campaign saying, "Hi, I'm Aaron O'Toole. Hi, I'm Aaron O'Toole. Hi, I'm Aaron O'Toole," because people are going to say, "Who the heck are you?"
Yep.
And then he's going to have to spend the rest of the campaign telling a bunch of people that he's different because they've got to grow their vote in Ontario, that he's not the same old true blue Conservative, yet he campaigned on being a true blue Conservative. So he's got to tell one thing to the people of Ontario that's not going to upset the people of Alberta, and he's got to tell another thing to the people of Alberta that isn't going to set the base, wherever they exist across the country for the Conservatives, that's not going to upset the progressive people. And he's stuck. He's still got a divided caucus. The Conservative base, the social Conservatives, haven't left the party yet. He's got to watch that flank. But, he can't, it's very difficult for him to say he's a different kind of leader of a different kind of party when 62 of his MPs vote against conversion therapy legislation. They're still shooting him in the knees every time he turns around. So he's got a big challenge managing his Conservative tent, while at the same time trying to broaden it beyond the folks who already identify themselves as Conservatives to get new people on board, when it's really not that credible. The other thing he has to do is put an economic recovery plan in the window. His environment plan was laughed out of town. Burn more or get more points, or whatever that Petro point card was he came up with. So they're not off to a rocketing start, and he's got a lot of catching up to do, as they would say.
I was listening to a podcast recently, Hurley Burley podcast, and Brian Mulroney was the guest, and the former Prime Minister said it's very tough for Aaron O'Toole right now and all the opposition leaders because the news coverage has been like this for a year. COVID. Here's the Prime Minister. COVID. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, it's very, very hard for him and Mr. Singh and the rest of them. So, but we'll close on this. We only have 2 minutes left. Recent poll, Angus Reid, the 3 least popular premiers in Canada, Jason Kenney, Brian Pallister, and Doug Ford. Meet the resistance. How could that impact the federal race, Garry?
So I actually think it will have little impact in Alberta and Manitoba, specifically because Liberal strength in those 2 provinces is not that high.
Okay.
Liberals and Conservatives fight over a couple of seats in Edmonton and Calgary. They've always been marginal seats that often flip back and forth over the past 10, 15 years. And provincially, the Liberal Party in Alberta is not a thing. In Manitoba, it's similar. It's an NDP Liberal fight. An NDP PC fight. And again, I don't think it actually has benefit there. But if Liberals sense that there's value in attacking Doug Ford in Ontario, that's how it may impact. I think Ford's been pretty protective of his popularity, and he's seen it, go down, obviously, especially in the third wave. But I think it all depends too on how the rollout. Jason Kenney's betting heavily on open for summer, July 2nd, everything's open,
Yeah.
and so I think it's a little early to tell on that. And the one jurisdiction where it might be a factor is Ontario. I think less so in those other 2 provinces.
Okay, very quickly, minute or less, Susan Smith.
Ontario, it will be a factor. Alberta, I think it actually could. Jason Kenney and Aaron O'Toole and Brian Pallister are all former caucus mates, but I think Jay Hill and the Maverick Party out west, I think there's a lot of unrest, and the Conservative base could split off in Alberta, so that could have an issue, I think, or stay home. And I think that's going to be a big issue for Aaron O'Toole mobilizing volunteers.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response